You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 15th of December 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
What we saw yesterday was an act of pure evil, an act of terror, an act of anti-Semitism, a dark day in Australia's history on what should have been a day of light.
Australia is reeling from an attack on Bondi Beach at a celebration of Hanukkah. We'll get reactions from Andrew Muller and Alexis Self. After that, we'll look at Thailand's new elections set for the 8th of February in the midst of an ongoing conflict with Cambodia. And we'll get a take on plans for a Dracula theme park just outside of Bucharest, Romania, from our own Romanian Laura Kramer. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Welcome everybody to this Monday edition of The Briefing. We will start with the news from Bondi Beach in Sydney, where at least 15 people were killed by two gunmen, a father and son. At least that's the reports from authorities at a Hanukkah celebration. Much of this is still developing, but Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and authorities have described this as an anti-Semitic and terrorist attack on the Jewish population. I'm joined now by Andrew Muller, Monocle's contributing editor and host of the Foreign Desk, and by Lex Self, Monocle's foreign editor. Good to have you both on the show. Andrew, I suppose I will start with you here. We have covered sort of the ins and outs of this on The Globalist this morning in terms of the breaking news aspects, but I'm wondering your thoughts just as an Australian. You may not be from Sydney, but you certainly know it well.
I spent much of my childhood there. I know it very well. I know the area very well, and it doesn't necessarily make any one terrorist attack any objectively better or worse than any other. But yeah, I think for most Australians, whether in Australia or around the world, this naturally enough hits a little bit deeper because this is familiar to us, this place and these people. There is also the aspect as well for Australians that this is something that we think of as something that happens somewhere else. We're an extremely fortunate country in any number of respects, but one of those respects is definitely that though there are tensions between the various communities that, constitute our nation from time to time, we have almost no tradition or history of deadly sectarian violence of this kind. This is, I really struggle to think of a comparable event in Australia's modern history.
Well, just sticking with you on that then, what do you make of some of the discussions that have already emerged from this, particularly on the security side? Because inevitably when something like this happens, it turns towards the security aspect, and Albanese, the Prime Minister, has been accused by some Jewish groups of maybe not providing enough security for an event like this. But can you really protect people when, as you say there, this is something that's extremely rare for Australia?
The short and unfortunate answer, which I realise nobody wants to hear at this point, is no. You can't, in an open society, secure everything. There were police in the vicinity of the event. Bondi's actual police station is 100 metres away from where the event was taking place. All Australian police are armed. It's not like there wasn't a shortage of available resources once it became clear that an attack was underway. But the reality is that in a country with thousands of events and institutions attached to various minorities which may be vulnerable for one reason or another, you cannot secure everything. A determined terrorist, if they cannot access target X, will target Y.
Lex, to bring you in on this, we don't know much, frankly, at this point about motivations. There are these reports that the attackers pledged allegiance to Islamic State. It is easy, as you were saying ahead of this show, to kind of have this kind of attack fall into our pre-existing narratives that we all hold. This one will, in that sense, inevitably once again spark debate around migration as well. What do you make of it?
Yeah, look, we don't know as of yet, so I'm not going to jump to any conclusions about motives. as Andrew was saying, Australia's splendid isolation, as it were, derives from a few things, human-made and not. But on the human-made, it's an incredibly open society, as you said, and a very diverse society. And that you saw the strength of that. You've seen the strength of that since the attack, but you saw the strength of that most obviously, in the fact that one of the bystanders who took down one of the gunmen was himself an immigrant. So I don't think, I think that the important thing is to be circumspect about these things. And, unfortunately, as Andrew said, these terrible atrocities occur. And, the fact that we live in an open society perhaps makes them more likely or after the event makes us imagine that we might have been able to prevent them. And of course, there are laws in place to prevent certain people or any people really getting possession of deadly weapons. And I know that that's something that Andrew's talked about. Maybe we'll talk about more Australian gun laws. But, Australian gun laws were and still are some of the most restrictive in the world. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see in this particular case how these individuals procured these weapons and what motivated them. But I think, just at the moment, everyone is just feeling shocked and in mourning with Australians.
Absolutely. And Andrew, though, what do you make of that debate around gun control? Anthony Albanese has said that laws will be tightened as a result of this. I have to say, personally, as an American, I am aware of this discussion also because there was a shooting also in the US this weekend at Brown University. Gun laws are not usually a conversation there. Do they need to be a conversation in Australia, or is it that thing that anyone who wants a gun is going to find a way to get one?
I think it's understandable that people will start to ask questions about this. I think it's also understandable that people in the position of the Australian government will fall into what is often known as the politician's fallacy. Something must be done, this is something, therefore we must do it. As you were correctly pointing out, Australia's gun laws are already exceptionally tight, and that is a response to the massacre at the Port Arthur tourist area in Tasmania in 1996, which had no particular ideological motivation, but after which the then Conservative Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, extremely determinedly and extremely courageously, given his core vote is, was determined to get automatic and semi-automatic weapons out of circulation. The government instituted an enormous buyback scheme. 643,000 weapons were taken out of circulation, and rules were tightened about what weapons can still be possessed. I know people in Australia who are licensed gun owners. A gun license is not an easy thing to acquire, and the rules around it are enforced. The question that's going to be asked in this specific case is why the older of the two assailants, the one who was killed, the father, Sajid Akram, was a licensed gun owner. So there will be questions attached to that, quite reasonable questions, specifically about the fact how he came to own a gun license when his son, the surviving of the two shooters, Naveed Akram, had an interest taken in him by our intelligence services over ties to some sort of self-styled Islamic State cell in Sydney. Those are quite reasonable questions. So I think we might see rules tightened about what licenses will be issued to people with certain associations. There might be rules tightened about how many weapons an individual has. Mr. Akram appeared to own 6. So I think that's essentially cosmetic. I really, really do. I think the majority of Australians do support our gun laws, and has been reasonably pointed out, in a scenario in which this pair had been able to acquire automatic weapons, this could have been exponentially worse.
Just very quickly to follow up on that, I mean, anything on this idea that the son was being investigated, is that a topic for you as well? Should more have been done there? That investigation was dropped again.
It's hard to know. One of his associates was convicted and is serving a sentence. The problem that intelligence services run up against, or a problem, and I've had this conversation with people who've had to deal with this, is the line between actual potential terrorist danger and delusional teenage grandstander is often a very slender and very, very faint one. And they did take an interest in Navid Akram. ASIO has acknowledged that. It's not clear why they dropped the investigation. Perhaps they just wrote him off as a teenage nitwit who would grow out of it eventually. But yes, we will obviously be finding out more about that in coming days.
Lex, just finally, another element of this, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sought to kind of directly link this to the Australian Prime Minister Albanese's recognition of a Palestinian state. What do you make of that? Because it is also something that, of course, could hit European nations, for that matter, that have also recognized a Palestinian state.
Yeah, I think that's very dangerous, and some might even call it victim blaming. I mean, conflating, and this is a problem that we have had, before October 7th, but in spades since, which is the conflation of the actions of the State of Israel and ordinary Jewish people around the world. I think it's inflammatory and dangerous to say that any criticism or attack on Jewish people or Israel is therefore, any act of anti-Semitism is therefore anti-Israeli and vice versa. Look, there's no doubt that it's been incredibly charged politically as a result of October 7th and the war in Gaza in many different countries, and it's impacted politics here in the UK for sure. But I don't think rhetoric such as this is helpful.
Lex and Andrew Muller, Monocle's contributing editor, and Lex South, Monocle's foreign editor. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be sure to have more on this going forward on the Monocle Daily and in our shows tomorrow. But now here's Carlotta Ribello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigner and media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been found guilty on national security and sedition charges. Mr. Lai, who is a UK citizen, faces life in prison and is expected to be sentenced next year. The verdict comes as Beijing yields increasing control over the semi-autonomous Chinese territory and seeks to crack down on its high-profile critics. Hardline conservative José Antonio Cast has won a landslide victory in Chile's presidential election. Cast beat the governing left-wing coalition with more than 58% of the vote in his third attempt at running for the role. The result marks the biggest shift to the right since the end of the nation's military dictatorship in 1990. And the Louvre Museum in Paris is closed its doors today as staff launched a strike to demand urgent renovations, staffing increases and protest against a rise in ticket prices. This comes just 2 months after a high-profile jewel heist when a 4-person gang raided the landmark, stealing an estimated 88 million euros of French crown jewels. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. To Thailand now, which has called for fresh elections to be held on the 8th of February, coming as clashes continue between Cambodia and Thailand along their disputed border. And joining us for more on this from Bangkok is James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor. James, good to have you back on the show. First of all, perhaps just explain why this conflict along the border prompted a call for fresh elections.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I guess, the first point to make is those two big things aren't actually directly related. As you said, the war with Cambodia is ongoing, very sadly, but the decision to call fresh elections is primarily a domestic issue. Just to kind of remind our readers of what's been going on in Thailand. The Prime Minister, Anutin Chanvirakul, is very much a kind of a caretaker Prime Minister. His party, the Bumjai Thai party, has only about 69 seats in the parliament. It is a minority party, and it's only running the government because it has this it's struck up this deal with the largest party, the People's Party, that it would get their support provided it pushed ahead with amendments to the constitution in Thailand, the constitution that was essentially written by the army. and that it would call elections after 4 months. So we knew elections were coming, but this is 1 month ahead of schedule. And the reason why it happened last week is because the Bondi party basically kind of reneged on its deal to push ahead with the constitutional reform. And the People's Party threatened a no-confidence vote. And so the Prime Minister triggered a dissolution so that he can essentially stay in power as a caretaker right up until February.
James, this may not be directly related to the conflict along the border, as you say there, but it is linked in the sense that there's certainly also an expectation that the conflict will have an impact on these elections. Tell us, from your perspective, what sort of impact it might have. Have you seen a sort of resurgence in kind of more nationalist sentiment in Thailand as a result of this?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Is obviously the ongoing war is going to be a huge factor in the elections, no matter what. The Prime Minister, essentially, he knew he had 4 months to try and kind of win votes before the election next year. But he's not had a good run. I mean, the economy is not doing well. They were handing out kind of sweeteners. But then Thailand had these devastating floods in the south, and the Prime Minister and his government were criticised for how they handled it. So I guess their one shot, perhaps, at doing well in the elections would be an upswing in nationalism. And if the war against Cambodia, I guess, is seen to go well. Because even though the House has been dissolved, the Prime Minister will stay in post right up until the election. So if there is a resolution to that conflict that is perceived in Thailand by Thai voters as being positive to Thailand, then that would obviously work in Anu Tin's favour.
And James, whether it works in his favour or not, I mean, Thailand's politics have been fractious for quite a while now. Do you have any sense that will change as a result of this election? Will we get a clear result either way?
I don't think so, no. So, I mean, this is like the third attempt for the People's Party, the opposition, the progressives, to try and get a majority in Parliament and actually kind of maybe bring about change. But it's going to be very tough. We've just had the latest national poll come out, and I guess the headline from the voters is that they're sick of everybody. I mean, the number one choice for the next leader of Thailand is undecided. And that person, the undecided person, has shot up to having 40% of support. And you can see a similar thing for parties as well. The People's Party is no longer the out-and-out favourite. Actually, most people are undecided and they don't know who to vote for. So I think the headline is voters are fed up. And going into the next election, I think there will be a clearer choice. And the People's Party does have the best chance of forming a government, but I wouldn't be putting any money on it. And even if they win the most seats like they did last time, the conservative faction here in Thailand will be throwing the kitchen sink at them and pulling all kinds of tricks to make sure that they once again are stuck in opposition.
Just finally, James, and we did hear some of the Cambodian perspective on this show on Friday, and I think the thing that struck me was this idea that Cambodia is obviously the far smaller side in this conflict, and therefore, at least from their perspective, has very little interest in keeping it going. I'm curious how that's seen in Thailand. Is Cambodia viewed as kind of the antagonizer here? Is the trust between these sides completely gone?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the exact opposite. Or actually, they're saying the same thing here. I mean, Thailand is accusing Cambodia of keep starting the fighting and keeping it going. I mean, a lot of the news coming out this week or today has been about indiscriminate rocket attacks from Cambodia, killing Thai civilians and how the Thai government is going to take this to the UN. So, both sides are saying, exactly the same thing. They're blaming each other. And I guess what's different this time around is that the intervention of the White House and Donald Trump doesn't seem to be having the same effect as it had last time. The Prime Minister, Anutin, has basically said, this is about Thai sovereignty and defending Thailand now. We don't care about trade. We don't care about deals. And even though Trump, went out on Truth Social to say that he rung up both leaders and they both wanted a ceasefire, the Thais came out and said that wasn't discussed. There was no talk of a ceasefire. So I think we're beyond that now. And of course, with the election coming up, no Thai leader can afford to appear soft on this. So I do think this news of this new election is not good news for those of us who are hoping for an end in the fighting.
James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, thank you very much for joining us today. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. To Romania now, where news of the past week is of plans for a Dracula theme park outside of Bucharest, Romania. And joining us now is Monocle Radio's senior producer and resident Romanian, Laura Kramer. Although, Laura, you do join us from our Zurich studio, perhaps I should say. Would you like to be in Romania right now?
Always. Yeah, Grüezi and bună ziua, Chris. Nice to be with you.
Good to have you here. I wanted to start actually with, though, going back into Romania, because I know you've visited some of the castles related to Dracula. Tell us, before we get to the theme park, what does Romania currently have on offer for Dracula fans?
Well, there's a lot. Well, first of all, you can start with Bran Castle, which is close to Brașov. It's a good place to start. There's also a lesser-known castle that's Poienari. It's actually one that Vlad the Imperial at the time had reconstructed, and I've actually trekked up the stairs to it. Right now, it's mostly rubble, I'll be honest. It's pretty broken down. Last time I was in Romania, though, I was told that it is no longer safe to do the trek. It's all these stairs, it's through the forest, and I was told that due to the bear population, it's not something you want to do. So that's the thing about Romania. If it's not one thing with really big teeth, it's another.
I love this, which is very fitting because you are also our bear desk chief, so I need to throw that title in there. For very good reason. I mean, given that, then, I guess, is this the time for an actual theme park? I mean, I'm reminded personally of, for example, doing in Germany, like the Brothers Grimm, you can do a trail, but they don't really market it very well. Is this a sign that Romania is kind of coming out front saying, yes, we're gonna create a big theme park for Dracula?
I think so, and I think with the footnote, I mean, the Dracula legend is a significant form of soft power for Romania, especially from the point of view of tourism and cultural branding. So Bucharest does like to leverage kind of this land of Dracula image for marketing and whatnot. And from that perspective, this large-scale attraction almost feels overdue. At the same time, I think Romanians are also naturally cautious about it. It's a €1 billion promise, and it's talk about the biggest vampire theme attraction. So I will say, though, the location makes sense, despite the fact that we think about Dracula in Transylvania. That area is very heavily forested. It's mountainous. It'd be very tough to build, somewhere near there, especially something on this scale and how protected that area is. This is being planned for about 15 minutes from Henry Conda International Airport, and we've already seen that logic work for Romania. There is this spa attraction called Therme Bucharest, which is about 5 kilometers from the airport, and that has attracted a significant foreign audience, over I think 30% international visitors in the spring of 2025 earlier this year. So in short, I think the conditions are there for it now. Whether the park actually lives up to the early promises, I think, is another question entirely.
And there are questions related to that also about the person who wants to create this park, I understand. As you say, this is a massive thing, €1 billion Dracula Land. But what about the millionaire behind it?
So he's Dragoș Dobrescu. He's a Romanian real estate entrepreneur, and he's kind of framing it as a very deliberate, as a national landmark. So it's not just a commercial park. So it's language that he's being very intentional about. He's also brought on these international architects and planners. So it's giving the project some credibility outside of all the hype around it. And as you said, it is very ambitious. We're talking like almost 800,000 square meters, 6 themed lands, 40 attractions. So it's like roller coasters, but also the hotels and all the foods that come along with it. I'm going to be curious, Chris, will there be garlic allowed on the actual theme park? Will it be like actually encouraged? Because you can also hunt down vampires in one part of it. So just saying.
I mean, are there going to be actual vampires there, I guess is the question then as well.
Well, I can't talk about that, Chris. We could only have it open at night then.
Just finally, Laura, I'm curious how the population, how people in Romania are going to see this, because I am reminded, again, to take a personal example, my father's hometown, Salzburg, it's the home of the Sound of Music, and yet Austrians are kind of ambivalent about the Sound of Music and what to do about it. You talked about Romania from a marketing perspective being very much into Dracula, but how do Romanians feel about that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because growing up, I got the sense that there was kind of like an eye roll thing associated with it. I mean, we learned about the real Vlad Țepeș in school, and the whole Dracula thing seems like it was kind of cheesy, and I'm just going to say it. I'm American. We can say this. More associated with Americans and Halloween and kind of ugh. But I think that's moved on a little bit now. As you said, we already are associated with Romania, with Dracula, so maybe it makes sense to just properly capitalize on it, use it a little bit more. And I mean, the developers are also talking about more than 5,000 jobs, and the economic impact of what they think over the next decade would be around 5 billion euros. So I think, there is curiosity, there's cautiousness, but overall there is excitement around the project.
I love that we have that in common, Laura, as a Romanian American and I as an Austrian American, that sort of ambivalence about Sound of Music and Dracula in Romania.
Absolutely. But, it is what it is. I personally like it.
Laura Kramer, Monocle's senior producer, thank you very much for joining us. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Anita Riota, our researcher was Joanna Moser, and our studio manager was Steph Chungu. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.